just want to tell you, Minister Cujo, that the more that I take this class, the more I fall in love with ARNA and what the chief has, what he's given to us.
Hey, no, that's good. No, that's really good, and that's the idea, right? It's like get you the information, get you the knowledge to actually start applying. Seeing how we operate and how we move, you know, it's just we just move differently, right? We're a tribal government, so and that's the importance, right? So no, I'm glad to hear that. Let me make sure this is good. Make sure I am streaming if I'm not streaming. It says no. Okay, cool. Make sure that's clear. Alright. Make sure camera's working. Alright, cool. Alright. So looks like YouTube is good. I'm gonna kick off like that. Go back to here. Alright. So that's good. That's good. Okay. Alright, peace family. Mr. Kojo from Aboriginal Republic of North America, local jurisdiction, HAWAB, Choctaw, Region 6. So, appreciate everybody's time and patience today. Sorry for the delays on this. But what we're going to be discussing today essentially is the Aboriginal Jurist course, Class 3, Debt Discharge and Mortages. And this, we're doing these classes, at least this portion, so that it just gives a little bit of information to the public. And if they're interested in actually, becoming a jurist and enrolling into the course, obviously keep in mind you can either, do it through ARNAgovernment.org or HAWAB, no biggie. But the whole idea is that to present this information so that you can actually, give you a little taste of what you'll be doing or what things you'll be, just fixing certain things in your life, right? So in this class, we're going to be discussing debt discharge, like I said, and mortgages, along with some various other subjects to kind of drive the point home of exactly of what it is that you need to know as a jurist. But again, for those who actually enrolled in this course, those are the people that I'll be answering their questions for, and depending on the audience and what they're asking, I may or may not be able to answer it. But really here for the students that are actually enrolled in the course. So, and let me just put that stuff in the chat. Cool. Put that in the chat. And I think we can go ahead and let me shrink out my screen so that the audience can see it. I'm going to zoom out. Cool. Alright. I'm going to rename it. Cool. And I'm going to put cool. I'll shrink it this time so everybody can see it. Cool. Alright. Cool. So these are the materials you're going to need. Obviously, we've mentioned them before, and these are the things that are going to help you answer a lot of the questions and homework that you have for homework 3. So as a reminder, and then this is the homework actually. So there's a few definitions that you're going to need to know, that you're going to need to understand, such as federal enclave, mortgage, lien, securitization, National Bank Act, or National Currency Act, positive law, prima facie law, obligor, obligee, real defenses, interrogatives, debt, discharge. These are terms that you're going to be, strict foreclosure. These are terms that you're going to need to know moving forward as a jurist, and just even to the public, these are terms you should know and just kind of put in your head. FDIC. These are things that are utilized in our day-to-day situations, right? So, and we want to make sure that you guys have a good understanding. So these are the terminologies that you can utilize. Black's Law, use Google, use you know whichever definitions that you can find. The whole idea is just to get an understanding of these terms and to be able to start using them. And then you're going to have an essay or a written out sample motion to dismiss a mortgage utilizing the 10 real defenses, right? So, and then you're going to write a 3-page paper on how the Department of Treasury must provide remedy through debt discharge, based on our class 3, right? So, not that difficult. We'll go over some few things to kind of drive the point home and just, what it is exactly that I'm referring to, right? So, just want to kind of keep everybody focused on, the events and situations that's happening in this world. But the clock is ticking. Time is going very quickly. And the whole idea of why I'm even, showing this is, and this was written back in like 2019 or whatever, but to show the history of like America's first bond market was backed by enslaved human beings, right? You're like, dang, the bond market, the first bond market, yes, backed by enslaved human beings, which is no different from what they're doing, which is as far as like with the debt. They're trying to enslave the whole human race through debt, backed by the U.S. dollar, which is a note from the Federal Reserve, which is an IOU, right? Like we talked about last time. So the idea is that if we can get you people to continue to be consumers instead of like creators, doers, and things of that nature, and we'll have you in a point where we can actually basically enslave you, and we'll give you some change to spend your money on. Like we'll give you UBI, right? And it's just like that's that's what the direction of where they're pushing us, right? And as you can see, they've already done UBI in California, right? So that is already here. So and people are buying into it. So what we're trying to make sure you understand and that you are able to communicate to nationals and non-nationals is to get them out of that headspace, that mindset that I'm just gonna take this benefits and just kind of ride it out, coast it out. No, like what they're doing, and then spending. Just I'm just gonna spend, and not actually create something. Create something that the world needs or solves a problem, and just tapping into the talents and potentials that each person has, right? So I just wanted to show this to display that the clock is ticking. And so when I say clock, literally there is a clock for the amount of debt that the U.S. has, and I believe it's 30 trillion right now. Like you can see right here, 30 trillion, and it's still counting. And these are the different parameters. They're trying to put everything with one world government, and the one world government wants to enslave humanity through different means, right? Whether it's through a form of currency, which is probably back a place where you can't do anything, but you just stay in to put you in bondage through means of debt, through means of food, through means of everything. And so that's the idea. We need to understand that debt is what. Anyway, so I know I'm ranting, but like I said, the world is changing, and I know I mentioned this before on Thursday, but like you can't see World Government Summit. Like that is real. This thing was it happened last week from the 29th or the 28th, and it was 3 days. 3 days long. This video right here, just this one video that this national sent me, 6 hours long. And they're discussing currency, they're discussing agriculture, they're discussing technology, they're discussing everything. And all these different policies that they're talking about, discussing with these world leaders that and just things of that nature. So that's why it's important for new people to actually, one, claim their nationality, and then two, get involved in politics on the local and nation level, because that is what's going to make things move. Is if we put people who actually understand and then put laws and things in place is going to be it's going to, and it, on top of having your political status in check and then and it's corrected, man, that's what's going to actually get off their ass and do something. So anyway, I'm not going too much on the rant. I do want to mention this. I know you see what it says. This video probably might be blocked. But before the whole world was shut down, this was actual plan that was a template from the CDC, right? And it got distributed to the 50 federal enclaves, which I'm talking about the states, because federal enclaves meaning that the federal government actually owns the 50 states. So keep that in mind. That's something you need to understand. So here's an example of the plan, right? And then look what it says. Just look what it says right here. So those, and as an example, this is what they're doing in all 50 federal enclaves. Texas will engage and coordinate efforts with leadership from tribal communities, tribal health organizations, and urban tribal organizations through briefings with tribal leader conference calls for the, and then also will offer support to all recognized tribal entities, including, blah, blah, blah. So, look, they're going for federally recognized tribes. They're going for state recognized tribes. They're going all these different things that have given up their individual sovereignty. Yeah, now they're talking with your leaders, right, within those tribes, and they say, hey, listen, you need to get your people to get protected. How you do that? By taking these. And that's what I mean by, like, when you actually belong to a tribal government, and I know I've said this before, but when you actually belong to a tribal government that has its own constitution, that hasn't given up their individual sovereignty, that means nobody can come in and say, yo, time to regulate. No, because we didn't sacrifice that, right? And that's your job. That's your fundamental understanding as a jurist that you need to understand, because this is the stuff that they do. And no one knew about this. Like, you can go Google it. It may still be there or it may not be there, but like each state has one. And the CDC gave, and then start moving accordingly, right? So, like I've mentioned before, crypto like dollar, she says several years from now. And do I believe her? No, because they brought this up before, probably like a year and a half ago. And these people, they tell you what they are going to do when they've already done it. So don't be fooled. And we'll get into just the importance of all this. So a book that I think is important for just jurists and just people to really read is The Creature from Jekyll Island. It'll give you a lot more insight of what the hell happened where these people met and discussed how we go into bondage people, utilizing notes, right? And the creation of the actual Federal Reserve, because we already talked about the Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express, right? They're not a federal entity, even though they're being portrayed as that, but they're a business. So a book to read, a book to listen to. Honestly, you'll get a lot of insight of what the hell's actually going on. So keep that in mind. And so I know we talked about this before. These are the people who are enslaving 99% of the world. Is through these 21 primary dealers to the Federal Reserve, right? Because they're the ones that are funding the Federal Reserve's debts. When they begin to print money, they have to get dealers to fund that stuff. And these are the people who are doing so. They are contributing to basically the world's genocide. So keep that in mind. So like I mentioned and broke down as far as like what is a federal enclave, right? Federal enclave basically is the United States, the territory of the 50 states that's transferred over to the federal government, in its exclusive jurisdiction. Point blank and period. So that's why the United States is able to do what they do, because they have exclusive jurisdiction. So over the 50 states or federal enclaves. 10 real defenses. As a jurist, you're going to need to know these are the real defenses, like for real. Like We're not going off into sovereign citizen land and start. Yeah, you know, you got to put your blood, steel stamp, and whatever, or blue ink. Sort of. Listen, 10 real defenses. These are the things that actually matter. From fraud to statutory limitations to duress to illegality, you know, forgery. I mean, like all these different things. Like these are real defenses. So, and you know, where we're talking about as far as like, loans, mortgages, you know, and debts and things of that nature. This is your tool belt of how you're going to dismiss and discharge debts and things of that nature. Now, as far as like mortgages and things of that nature, you'll learn and get a little bit of insight of how to actually, you know, do audits utilizing RESPA and things of that nature. And we'll show you some real examples of doing that and just how to find some information and how to actually go about doing it. So and that's in phase 2 once you actually pass the exam and things of that nature. But like these things right here that you're seeing right here, from fraud, forgery, these are the 10 real defenses. These are what you're going to be tapping into every time somebody comes to you with a problem. And they're saying, hey, I got this debt. It's like 20 years old. And I haven't paid it. It's like, but I keep getting hassled. I keep getting haggled. I keep getting, you know, bothered by these debt collectors. And keep in mind, this debt, and this is where it goes into statute of limitations. Like any 7-year-old debt is supposed to fall off of your credit report, right? But you have to notify the bureaus and the parties that are trying to collect, because if you don't tell them, they're like, it ain't our fault that you ain't checking to make sure your report is accurate, even though they have a responsibility to make sure that it is accurate and that they're reporting accurate information. But you still have to invoke it. You have to tell them. So that's an example of utilizing the, you know, one of the 10 real defenses, because you're going to get clients like that are going to come to you, and you need to understand that this is like there's different means to basically. Cool. So National
I
Bank.
have a question about that.
Oh,
I'm
yep.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So when you say with the 20-year debt or any debt over 7 years, say like with these student loans, and you've owed them for like 20 years or something, and they keep renewing it. How are you? If you're renewed and assigned these, what you call them, consolidation, and the Department of Education, and re-sign or whatever, how is that? Isn't it like you're renewing the debt even though it was 20 years old or 10 years old?
Well, if you're renewing, if the person's renewing, meaning they've signed a new contract and now they've consolidated from if they just if and see that's what ended up happening. So probably the person might have been put under duress to like get it, you know, consolidated, and so they say, hey, you know, we'll cut you a deal. We'll consolidate all your student loan debt into one, and maybe we'll cut, you know, a part of it off if you sign a new agreement. And if you remember from class 2 and class 1, we were talking about contracts years, and they took a simple affidavit and notified the bureaus of, yo, this is a 20-year-old student loan debt, and according to statute of limitations, 7 years, that's supposed to fall off and come off my credit report. And if you don't do that, then we're going to have a serious issue. And then you give them a chance to actually do right. So you may send them 2, you know, maybe 3 letters to notify them, hey, still hasn't came out for a credit report. If you're saying it's a valid debt, then at this point, since we know this is an adverse debt, ain't made a payment in, you know, 8+ years, because now it's going on. It's 20 years old, and it's adverse. So now I'm going to take it to federal court, because obviously this is a issue. You're violating the laws, and we got to hold you accountable. So that's the way you do it. So it depends. If the person signs a new contract, then we're looking at a whole nother thing. They signed a new contract versus addressing it the way that I just broke it down. So does that make sense?
Thank you. Makes a lot of sense. Like it's how you contracted yourself, even if you did it with no knowledge, but definitely understand the difference. Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's keep that going. Okay. National Banking / Currency Act of 1864. This is basically telling how banks are supposed to be operating. Point blank and period. Congress has laid it out, but banks are still doing what they needed, or basically committing acts of fraud. And we see that all the time. They're manipulating J.P. Morgan, manipulating the gold and silver market, like, and they just take $100,000 fine, and why is that? Because nobody's calling them out. Nobody's literally saying, "Yo, you're not supposed to be doing that." Everybody's just like, J.P. Morgan is going to continue to manipulate the gold and silver market, even though they're not supposed to, but nobody's holding them accountable. So, but there's literally a law in place that states that they're not supposed to be doing what they're doing. So, and the same thing goes with the comptroller and regulating of bonds and things of that nature. They're just used as, again, instruments to enslave humanity. So I won't spend too much time on that. Definitely you can go in and read it. There's something I want to talk about, which is fractional reserve banking. This is exactly how the system. It's really not 90%. It's actually 100%. So basically, there was at one point in time where you, as the person, deposit your money into the bank, and by law, banks are allowed to invest up to 90% of what was deposited, and they're not actually, they have to keep 10% in reserves in case you wanted to withdraw your money, right? And then they loan out that money to, somebody else, or, fund, or whatever the case is. But now banks don't even have to hold no money no more. They can invest 100% of the money that you deposit in that bank account. So what does that mean? That means there's a lot of fraud happening. But by law, they're allowed to do that because of fractional reserve banking. And so this is the concept that you need to understand, that you need to get. So holding a whole wads of cash and things of that nature in the banks, hey, I know you gotta do what you gotta do, but keep in mind, what's actually happening, right? Not trying to put any type of fear or anything, but I'm just giving you the concept as a jurist to understand. You need to understand how currency is moving, and how debt is moving, and what debt is actually doing to enslave humanity. With the petrodollar, which is backed by what? Debt. Everything is, and that's why you see Russia, China. These folks are like, yo, we ain't trying to hold no dollar. We're not trying to hold this debt. We'll go into gold. We'll go into crypto. We'll even go into the yuan. But holding the U.S. dollar, nope. So and that's what's happening, right? So keep that in mind. So just wanted to put that concept in your head. And this is what I mean by there's notes in circulation. There's only supposed to be $300 million of notes in circulation. We are past that with 30 trillion. Let's talk a little bit about mortgages. I won't spend too much time, but obviously there's some statutory issues dealing with mortgages and some of the things that are happening now. Obviously, laws have changed since then, so that's why we have to be mindful. So if there's a situation where a person um, is not able to, let's say, pay their mortgage, or they fall behind and they're about to lose their house, that's when um, we could step in, do an audit, review the contracts, and then help them, save their house, and discharge the debt or remove the debt. But if a person is able to pay the mortgage, let them pay the mortgage, right? So just keep that in mind. But we definitely can always still see what the hell is happening with the fraud, with the securitization, and we'll show you an actual example of that. But I definitely wanted to walk you through the securitization process of what happens within mortgages, right? So obviously, person wants a loan, and they're thinking that they're going to get money to buy the house, right? Okay, so they work with, depending on which agency, they go with the bank. Bank holds the loans to the signing of the wet signature of that person, and then as soon as that happens, banks sell that hoe, or holding companies sell the loan, sell your signature, even though you're the only person signing that loan, even though you need two people to sign a freaking contract. So they're just taking your contract and selling it, and somebody endorses it. And then while people are making money, the loan is already being paid for utilizing your signature, because they endorsed it, paid in full, blah blah blah. But yet you're paying on something that and that's the fraud. That's the fraud within the whole situation. So you as a jurist, you studying within this jurisdiction on law need to understand that concept of what is actually taking place. So keep that in mind. So here's an example of somebody somebody endorsing um, this a mortgage, and they're doing it without prejudice. So this is something you need to know. If somebody signs without prejudice, that means you can't even hold them liable. They've removed all liability. They're like, nope, you ain't gonna come after me because the way they signed without prejudice. So, as a jurist, you need to understand this is a terminology that you know you need to understand. But here's an example of like I said, endorsed it, right? Wet signature. Before before like this is after you've signed it already. Nobody else has signed, but then they endorse it with, and then they sell it off, right? And they put it on the Wall Street market, bond market, whatever, and people start investing into this. So this is what's happening, and this is how they're keeping people enslaved. So I'm just saying. So as we talked about, I mean, this is the real estate fraud. So entities are not even supposed to be holding by law property for more than 5 years. After that point, they're supposed to actually let it go, according to the National Banking Act, right, or the National Bank Association, right. It says right here, such association shall not purchase or hold real estate in say um, other purpose than to specify not to hold da 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 da, or just hold the title and possession of any real estate, secure any debts due to for no longer than 5 years. So you're seeing what they're actually issuing is 30-year-old mortgages. Whew. How are you doing that? You're not even supposed to be. How can you do that? By the National Bank Association, you're not even supposed to be doing that. But again, laws and implementations have been put into place that have allowed this fraud to actually take place. So in the case where somebody does fall behind and they're about to lose their home, and maybe it's like 3, 4, or 5 years, and I can tell you in some certain situations, the what happens is that the mortgage company has given up the loan, sold it, they've done a sheriff sale, and now probably it's been put on for auction. The house has been put on for auction without the person's notice or consent. All of this is taking place within that period of time because what they're trying to do is trying to get more money. They're trying to get the property back, and then they're trying to restart that process again because they said, well, the debt is bad anyway, so we're not going to spend a whole bunch of time doing that. So I don't know if you had a question, Jada. You sounded like you were going to ask something, so just want to make sure that I get you. Okay. Well, I'm gonna keep it moving if you're good. Do. And then there's actually penalties against people doing that. So this is stuff that these mortgage companies, these lenders, these banks, they're, they're supposed to be held liable for that. But because of the way they actually endorse the instrument without prejudice, you can't hold them liable. But whoever actually holds the instrument and is selling it, flipping it, all this other stuff, they can be held liable. But the whole idea is that this is all fraud that's taking place. So, um,
Can I ask you this? Is the fraud the fact that I think that I'm entering into a contract with one particular entity, and I, in fact, am not? Is that where the fraud lies?
that's one area. Like the idea is that you're thinking that you're going to get receive capital to actually pay to get a loan to actually buy a house, but in reality, that's not what's happening. They're taking your signature, securitizing it, and that's actually the money that's actually paid off the loan. But then you're thinking that you still, you have to pay back this loan when indeed it's already been paid in full, utilizing your wet signature. So when they securitize it and then they flip it, they put it on the bond market, that in itself is the fraud that's taking place, or the modification of a contract. That's That's the issue, is that they've modified something that you weren't even aware of. But because of the mortgages laws and the banks and the banking laws that have been put in place and changed, um, it's they're more and more allowed to do so, and we just have to navigate accordingly based off of what the contract says, what has actually been done. Because, like for example, um, a person may buy a house and they get a mortgage, and it says that if they transfer or sell the property, like basically, let's say they sell it to a business, which is the business that they own, and they transfer it. Well, that would enact a specific clause, which is the due sales clause, and so that person would need to pay in full of the loan. And when you do that, then that's where a lot of issues and blah blah blah. But that again, that's based on some of the contracts that are put in mortgages, like the due sales clause. So it's the process of when they alter the material alteration of the contract. That is the fraud, and that's the issue, is the material alteration. They're altering the contract, so that's the issue. So does that make sense?
Yes, sir. It makes perfect sense. Thank you for explaining.
Mm-hmm. So these are types of actions that you need to get familiar with as a jurist. Motion to compel by affidavit, motion to dismiss by affidavit, um, fraud claims, quorum ranto, right of memorandums. I mean, these are things, Chapter 7, no asset bankruptcy filing, omnibus motion. These are things that you're going to need to know and be familiar with and comfortable, or motion for jury trial, right? Because these are the things that we're going to do and that you're going to do in order to get your remedy, right? Notice of removal via diversity of citizenship. These are things you're going to want to do to put things in. We have specific examples that we'll go through in phase 2, but I'll show you a sample of a motion just so you understand the concept. So the whole idea of a motion when you're in court is to move the court, to tell them what you want them to do. When you're in court and you want, let's say, somebody, you need more time. And this is just what this is. You need more time. So you're requesting for an extension. You don't just say, hey, court. You don't call the court, say, hey, court, I know my court hearing is 2 days from now, or the client, you're telling the client to go call the court and say, hey, I need more time. They're like, okay. They're going to tell you, well, you need to put in some paperwork. They're not going to tell you because they're like, we can't give you legal counsel. They always do that. So what you need to do if you want the courts to move or do something, because that's the whole idea of a motion, is to move, is movement, right? You've put in a motion to extension of time and request a new date, and then you would put in the motion. But this motion that we're looking at right here is the motion to appear via conference call, via just on the telephone versus in person. You can do that, but you have to tell the courts what to do, and that's the whole idea of a motion. Now, along with this motion that you're putting, obviously you have to. There's an order, and that's where you allow for the judge to sign if they approve it or deny it. But also there's But there's also where you have to also serve the parties involved, meaning you got to serve in this case, Bank of America, which is the plaintiff, and then you're going to have to serve the courts. So that's proper, courts and procedures. Is that when you're putting in, certain documents, certain motions, certain affidavits, you're serving all parties involved, and that's part of like courts and procedures. So again, I know that was a lot, but you're going to need to. One of your homework assignments is to write a motion, and there's certain aspects that you're going to need to have within that motion, such as who are the parties involved, what's the court that you're at, what is the motion that you're actually trying to communicate and move within the courts. Make sure that I didn't come through. Okay. You're gonna have to actually show within this body that what you're writing with the motion, what you actually want the courts to do, and obviously you're gonna sign it and date it. So that's kind of the basic concept of like writing a motion, right? That's the idea. And you're going to be doing a lot of these for nationals and non-nationals, right? So you need to be comfortable with communicating and doing court procedures, even within our jurisdiction and outside of our jurisdiction, because you're going to interface with different jurisdictions from time to time. So again, this is for students that are actually enrolled. We can actually go in details as far as actually having to do this. So let's spend too much time. So proper techniques in court that you're going to need to always do, especially with let's say there's an issue with the statute of limitations, and you notified all the bureaus and or agencies that hey, you're not doing this, and by law you're supposed to. They're like, we don't know what you're talking about, or it's invalid. They're like, we don't want to. Well, okay, so you go in to the federal court, say, hey, this is what's happening. So you're obviously communicating what is the cause of action. And then two, they're obviously going to ask you for diversity of citizenship, whether because it matters, right? Is it a state jurisdiction that you're wanting to keep this in, or is it a diversity of citizenship? And obviously, every time you want to do this, you want to do, and it doesn't matter whatever situation is the diversity of citizenship according to USC 28/1332 all the time, so that you can sue for damages and hold people liable, and it's a federal issue. And then we also have techniques to, whenever we're doing adversary proceedings for Chapter 7, asset that we can protect the person's assets within our entities or Aboriginal trust and things of that nature. And they can actually use that entity to operate their businesses and do labor and things of that nature. So these are things you're going to need to know. These are things you're going to need to be familiar with, comfortable with as a jurist, right? So, and to just kind of close it out, I know won't keep everybody too long, but this is the homework. If you're not familiar with some of these terms, again, utilizing Oxford Dictionary, Google Black's Law Dictionary, the manual, and you'll be able to answer these or write out these definitions. And then since we went over motion, you should be familiar with writing a motion, and then also why a debt of discharge should be, a debt relief based off of what we talked about, and why the Department of Treasury should provide remedy. So, if you have any questions on that for students, let me know, and we'll be let us know, and we'll be able to answer that question for you or questions. So, on that note, I don't know if I see anything as far as like questions and stuff. So, I won't spend too much time. Did you have any questions, Jada? Make sure everybody's good. Okay.
Not at this time. I wouldn't know what to ask.
Okay, cool. No sweat. Now, I just want to make sure that you're good, so that you can continue to move forward. So, all right. We won't spend too much time. Family, definitely do appreciate the time that you took into tune in to this live, but we'll rock it out for next week for class 4, and then we'll get the students started on the exam, so we can get that ball rolling. So on that note, family, peace.
Yeah, Mr. Cujo, one question. How?
Make sure you get your questions and make sure you have a basic understanding, and just make sure that
Okay.
we're filling in the gaps for you. Does that work?
All right. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.